Hello and welcome. This is the Zen community of Oregon, making the teachings of the Buddha Dharma accessible to support your practice. New episodes air every week.
Thank you all for coming to this sesshin and staying, especially those who are relatively new to sesshin. Staying is a very important part of practice. Persistence. This is Koan Sesshin for 2025. This is an unusual sesshin in the array of the 12 sesshin and then the 12 or more shorter programs that we offer at the monastery every year. We have sesshin on feel-good themes, heart-opening themes such as loving kindness in June and gratitude sesshin in November. We have a sesshin on the ancestors to help us realize that we're part of a lineage that stretches back for 2,560 or more years, passing through many different cultures and enduring. And that this lineage were of all kinds of people. They too, like us, were tall and thin, short and fat, jolly and morose. They were Indians with dark, full beards and Asians with 4 long chin hairs. I'm smiling because when I went to college, one of my classmates was a Chinese man, and he had a beard that was this long, but it was 4 hairs. They were male and female and neither. They were of all ages, had all the usual kinds of illnesses that human beings have. We offer retreats on the 4 Brahma Viharas, the divine abidings, with a little bit of Tonglen thrown in to make you feel like you've encountered something tough. And in August, grasses and trees to help you discover that the meadow and the forest are your original home. And that trees will give you Dharma advice if you're able to quiet your busy mind and mind meld with them and ask them an important question. Koan Sesshin is different, as you may have realized by now. Koan work says, leave behind the constructed self and all the interesting stories that we tell ourselves and tell each other about our life. Step out of that paradigm completely. It says no matter how smart or not, no matter how well educated or not, how talented or not, how attractive or not, that is not who you really are. That's a temporary existence put together by cause and effect, by praise and blame, by the action of karma. And that temporary, superficial aspect of your entire existence is not who you really are. Koan practice is designed to cut through all the usual defenses and strategies that protected us from, in each case, from what? You know. From suffering. To protect us from suffering, whether it's called a school bully, or an angry parent, or racial taunts, or failure at school, or poverty, or hunger, or a person that we loved rejecting us, or anguish about the state of the world. It's very interesting to practice with Shoto Roshi because he does not care one bit about who we are except when we're right in front of him and what our state of mind is. I don't think he remembers even if he ever knew that I was a pediatrician or that I have children or that we have grandchildren or that Hogan was a naturopath or that we were at Larch Mountain, then we came here. He does not care about any of that at all. Because that's not who we really are. That is who we are temporarily in this lifetime. It was very weird at first because we were much more personal as we are here with our students. We were much more personal with Maizumi Roshi because we lived in a community. We saw each other every day. I was the doctor for the community. I helped, when people in the community had babies, I took care of their babies. We were a big family, like we are here. And it was very startling at first to go and work with what one of our long-term friends, who's American but was a monk and studies in Japan and has lived in Japan most of his life. He calls Shoto Roshi one of the last original Zen teachers. What he cares about is helping you clarify your state of mind and end your suffering and finding out who you really are and living that. So we developed ways of protecting us from all the difficulties we faced from the time we were small. And the problem is, by the time we're adults, we've practiced them so often that those defenses and strategies have become a kind of armor. These defensive strategies are armor, whether they are enacted as, "Oh, silly me, can you help me?" Or, "Shut the fuck up or I'll knock your teeth out." Or, "I beg to disagree with what you just said. I read an essay by Mr. Super Expert that said," or, "I don't like this, so I'll sign an executive order banning it." Or, "I'll never fit in. I'm so lonely." Or, "I'm so stupid, I'll never learn how to do koan work. I give up, I'm going home." All of Zen practice, if earnestly undertaken, can have the effect of dissolving our defensive strategies. One of the delights of being a teacher and living here for over 20 years, and at Larch Mountain for 10, is to watch people who come to live at the monastery for years, over the course of years, and to see them gradually shed bits and pieces of their armor and emerge like beautiful butterflies emerging from a cocoon and try their wings. Whether as monastics or as parents or as junior teachers or in whatever profession allows them to manifest their vows. However, during the course of sustained practice, everyone hits barriers. The kanji for barrier is like two doors, two closed doors. And then the same on the other side. It would remind you of the doors in the cowboy movies to the saloon, like that. So barrier is Koan, and it's drawn like two doors, and it happens when a big piece of armor is loosening and almost ready to fall off and be left at the roadside. And it's the job of the teacher to help a sincere student face these barriers when they arise and not to run away. The Koan can take many forms: panic attacks, surges of intense anger, tears of hopelessness, nausea. I once had a student who said, when I go in the Zendo, I feel like I'm going to throw up during Sesshin. I said, fine, just put a bowl in front of you. They didn't throw up. However, in one other occasion, we had someone throw up all over the person in front of them. It's okay. You know, when you look at it from the Zen point of view, vomit is just food plus time. It's true. And a little stomach acid. So this Koan will emerge at a critical time in your practice. It could be an upwelling of powerful emotions. It could be body sensations such as intense heat or cold. And doing work, honest work with koans, can do two things. It can begin to loosen the armor. Hide yourself in a pillar. What percent is person? What percent is pillar? Oh, I'm 30% pillar and 70% person. In a face-to-face interview, personal interview, which is required for koan practice, the teacher can sense the energy of the person and sense the energy of the pillar, wobbling back and forth. As soon as you ask a question, more person. And say, or in the old days, shout, hide completely. Ding-a-ding-ding-ding. And the teacher can sense when a pillar manifests itself in the room. So this koan, hide yourself in a pillar, is actually based, not hide yourself in a pillar. The koan, the second koan we've given people, bamboo in the garden, is based on a classic koan, Joshu's oak tree. A monk asked Joshu, what is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming to China? Joshu said, the oak tree in the garden. So this was a classic question that people asked each other, monks asked each other, or teachers asked monks. What is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming when he was supposedly in his hundreds, undertaking the dangerous journey from India to China to bring the Dharma? So there are different answers that are given in this famous koan. Joshu says, the oak tree in the garden. So because we don't have an oak tree in the garden, we changed it. So I again had problems printing out, but I think I've got this in the right order. Okay. So Muman commented on Oak Tree in the Garden, if you understand Joshu's answer intimately, there is no Shakyamuni Buddha before you, and no Maitreya to come. So what does that mean? There's no Buddha before you, and there's no Buddha to come. There's just you. Mumon's verse, words cannot express things, speech does not convey the spirit. Swayed by words, external words or internal words, one is lost. Blocked by phrases, one is bewildered. So, a number of you expressed bewilderment about doing koans. There's an old story of a monk who decided to work on this koan, Joshu's oak tree, and locked himself in a room, or confined himself into a room, and said vowed he would not come out until he completed this koan, or the koan completed him. So he'd been in there for several days, without stopping, without eating, just meditating on this koan, when a young acolyte accidentally opened the door and immediately backed out in fear because there was a huge oak tree in the room. So Sakita Roshi has a very nice commentary on this, the oak tree in the garden. There were many giant oaks in the garden of Joshu's temple. Actually, we visited Joshu's temple a number of years ago. And now the trees are cypress trees. So sometimes this koan is cypress tree in the garden. There were many giant oaks in the garden of Joshu's temple. We can well imagine that Joshu himself was personally familiar with every tree, stone, flower, weed, and clump of moss in the precincts of his temple, as intimately acquainted with them as if they were his own relatives. Those of you who live at the temple for a long time know what that means. I once saw an example of such intimacy in an old priest who lived by himself in his temple. He had been ill, and when I visited him, he was sitting quietly at the window, basking in the sun. A few books of haiku and a notebook were beside him. He had been composing haiku. It was a calm winter day. In the course of our conversation, he pointed to a pine grove in front of the temple and said, "You know the Zen question, the Bodhisattva of great mercy, Avalokiteshvara or Kanon, has 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes. Which is the true I?" And then the old priest said, "I could not understand this for a long time. But the other day, when I looked at the pine trees bending before the cold blasts from the mountain, I suddenly realized the meaning. You see, all the boughs, branches, twigs, and leaves simultaneously bend to the wind with tremendous vigor." He said this with a quiet but earnest gesture. I could feel his close intimacy with the pine trees. He had to convey his experience to somebody else. It was the evening glow of his life. He died a few weeks after our meeting. You can't do a koan work adequately except in person. That's why the Zen tradition is a face-to-face tradition. A number of years ago, before we had Zoom, I understand some people are doing it on Zoom, which I can't imagine how you could do because you can't read energy at all. A well-known Roshi, older Roshi, not a Japanese Roshi, would never do this, but an American Roshi, was doing sanzen with students who lived at a distance. And I asked, how does that happen? And they said, oh, well, he'll say to me on the phone, so here's your koan, tell me what you would do. And then the person would say, well, I would raise my arms and jump up and down. And then Koan Roshi would either pass them or not. Amazing. So the other thing that can arise, besides panic attacks, surges of intense anger, body sensations, and so on, when the armor begins to loosen, is not only confusion, because we're not oriented to the world the way we're used to, and even anger, protective anger. Don't risk this anger. I don't understand how to do this anger. Get away from me, stupid teacher anger. I will never do koan study again anger. But remember, underneath anger is always fear. Always fear. When a koan asked us to drop the armor of our constructed self, and we start to move in that direction, the personal identity that we have so carefully assembled and protected for years reacts. Nope, we're not going there. This is stupid. I'm leaving. So when we approach the koan, the barrier, it's actually a pivot, just like in our chants. Oh no, the pivot's beginning to turn. Run. So I can give you an example from my early years of training. I was working very, very intensely on the first koan that I worked on. And it was evening zazen. I remember exactly where I was and when it was, what the quality of the light was. It was the last period of sitting, and an intense panic arose. Like, I have to get out of here. But I knew that I couldn't leave. It's that, also that sensation of ring the goddamn bell. I often said if sheer mental energy could ring a bell, it would happen the last sitting on the third day of Sesshin. So I realized all the ancestors have gone through this. So I imagined the ancestors in a line. There's a very sweet little calligraphy of monks all lined up in a line. And so I imagined all the ancestors behind me, tall and short, fat and skinny, old and young, bearded and clean-shaven and so on, behind me, and just imagine leaning back into them. And I asked them for help. I said, I know that you have faced this barrier yourselves, and you did not give up. Please support me because I am not giving up. And I sat, and eventually the bell rang. But it was extremely important to go through that and come out on the other side. Over years of practice, we learned, here's that koan barrier again. So it's taken various physical forms for me. At one time, it was like this stabbing feeling, like somebody was jabbing a needle into my thigh. And then it became a sensation of intense cold down the right side of my back. But over time, when you learn, this is the koan barrier again. And it's actually a gate. It's a gate to liberation. A door is almost ready to open. Then you learn to welcome that fear, that chill, that panicked feeling. Because something very interesting is going to occur. And we learn to sink deeper into the practice, deeper into the breath, deeper into concentration, into becoming what the koan asks us to become completely. So for those who have worked in the past or are working now on mu is not something outside of us. None of this is something outside of us. Mu is not something that we must beat on and finally get inside of us. We can't get inside it because it has forever been us. It's closer than our tongue, our breath, or our beating heart. It moves in and out freely without our awareness, regardless of our awareness or regardless of our ignorance of it. Mu is not a destination because it permeates everywhere. Every place and everything, there is no way to get away from it even when you die. Isn't that comforting? It is never anywhere else than here. And yet it eludes us. Isn't that frustrating? I know well that koan work is frustrating. We're not frustrating you enough, by the way, because we're just giving you a little taste of what koan work is like. It can be very acutely disappointing to feel that you have grasped the essence of a koan and to wholeheartedly demonstrate that in private interview and to have the teacher bark, "No, work on it some more," and immediately ring the bell. That dismisses you without discussion or argument, or even worse, if the teacher snickers, rings the bell, or laughs out loud. I know this so well. You return to the meditation cushion with either more determination to see through the veil that covers true reality, or more often you return with reactivity, sulking on your cushion and fuming internally. I know I saw through this koan. I know that was the right answer. But eventually, just breathe, you settle down, you clear your mind, and you dive back into the koan. That very frustration that you felt becomes the fuel for digging deeper. And if you do, you discover after several rejections that the teacher was right. There was more to see and experience within this koan. It is frustrating to fall into the same trap repeatedly, the trap of falling again into self-view, one-sided view. If you start musing, I think I have this koan figured out, then the very next time you try a presentation that worked with the last koan, you're wrung out. Koan training actually whips you back and forth between the relative and the absolute, part and whole, emptiness and endless manifestations, self and no self, clarity and confusion, success and failure. Wherever there's any aspect, any corner that is unclear, the koan will find you out. To make koan work even more puzzling and more frustrating, sometimes Zen teachers will contradict themselves. So these are two cases involving a teacher named Nansen, whose student was Joshu, who was quite famous. So Nansen seems to say, in this first case, that our mind is not the way to awakening. It And we've talked about that our ordinary mind is not the way to awakening. So, case 34 in the Gateless Gate, Nansen said, "The mind is not Buddha. Wisdom is not the way." Mumon's comment, we could say that Nansen, though an old man, had no sense of shame. As soon as he opened his stinking mouth, he let slip the family secrets. However, only a few appreciate his benevolence. But in this next case, he seems to contradict himself, asserting that the ordinary mind is the way. Or does he? Joshu asked Nansen, "What is the way?" "Ordinary mind is the way," Nansen replied. "Shall I try to seek after it?" Joshu asked. If you try for it, you will become separated from it," responded Nansen. Joshu asked, "Then how can you know that it is the way?" Nansen replied, "Tao does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is illusion, not knowing is oblivion. If you really attain to the way of no doubt, it is like the great void, boundless as space. How then can there be this or that, right or wrong, in the way?" Boundless space. How then can there be this or that, right or wrong, in the way? At these words, Joshu was suddenly enlightened. Mumon's comment, Nansen was questioned by Joshu, and he cracked like scattering tiles and melting ice. Unable to provide any explanation, even though Joshu did awaken, he had to investigate it for 30 more years. The verse, "Spring blossoms, hundreds of flowers, and autumn, the moon. Summer brings in cool breezes, winter, the snow. If your heart-mind is not clouded with trivial things, this is a good season in a human life." So this brings up the question of what sort of ordinary mind is Nansen talking about? Is he talking about the mind that's full of thoughts is the way? Is he talking about the mind of innocent babies? Is he talking about the mind that over time is at first ordinary, then with awakening extraordinarily seeming extraordinary, and then ordinary again as the specialness of the awakened mind fades and it becomes one's natural way of being? When Mumon says in the verse that your heart mind is free of all clouds, is that an extraordinary or truly ordinary state? It's not enough to pass all the koans. In fact, some people can plunge into this work as a form of spiritual bypassing, imagining that they're making progress while ignoring the problems that they have in their ordinary life. A requirement for senior students and for those who are moving potentially towards teaching is long maturation. So Joshu was 17 when he came to Nansen and asked about the mind of the way. So he was 17 when he first awakened. He remained with Nansen until Nansen died, at which time Joshu himself was 60 years old. Then Joshu undertook a 20-year pilgrimage, vowing that if he met anyone who could teach him, he would learn from them, even if it was a child. And if he met someone that he could teach, he would teach them. And he became abbot of Kanon-in, the temple, at age 80, and taught for 40 more years, it said. Long maturation means learning to integrate the relative and the absolute. The rational, thinking, knowledge-filled mind, the one that we're all using all the time before we encounter practice, and the mind of open awareness, of no fixed ideas, the mind of all possibilities. It means that when you face a problem, you work on it with whatever training or resources you have acquired in your human life, because the Dharma will use any skill that you have. But always underneath the work that you're doing, within your body, heart, and mind, within how you see the world and how you see people and problems, there is running a river of complete ease, of no fear, of countless possibilities, of infinite flow. Infinite and perfect flow. Some of you during Sesshin may have touched that flow, that sense of flow, that you no longer have to think about, should I do this or should I do that? You just flow. And the day is almost seamless. Long maturation. It goes on until we die, it doesn't end. My image of doing this is learning to walk with one foot that is, in my case, size 7.5, and one foot that is immeasurable. And of course we wobble. It's like step, step, until we learn to let the river pick us up and carry us without resistance. Long maturation, absolutely essential. So there was a Tang Dynasty Chan master, Qingwan Weixin, who wrote about the transition from ordinary to extraordinary to ordinary. Before one studies Zen, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. After a first glimpse into the truth of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains, and waters are no longer waters. After enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains, and waters once again waters. So is his second ordinary the same as the first? The Japanese Zen master Dogen Zenji, who lived in the 1200s, wrote a waka poem about the second ordinary. Colors of the mountains, streams in the valleys, all in one in all, the voice of Shakyamuni Buddha. And Maizumi Roshi used to say this: colors of the mountains, streams in the valleys, all in one in all, the voice and body of my Shakyamuni Buddha. Towards the end of a curriculum of koan training, we're given difficult-to-pass koans called Nanto koans. They're important because even after years and years of practice, we all still have obscurations or karmic conditions that prevent deepening of our practice and further awakening. One of the blessings of this practice is it never ends. Never ends. And I haven't experienced this, but I think it continues into next lifetimes. Maybe I am the experience of its continuing. The Zen literature describes the essential requirements for kensho, or seeing into true reality, as great determination, great doubt, and great faith. Great determination means never giving up. Absorbing yourself into the koan, and the koan into you, until the two fuse. Great doubt means that a palpable mass of questioning becomes the engine for complete absorption into the koan and dropping the self. Great faith means never giving up in the certainty that you, like all the ancestors and Dharma students of the past, are intrinsically enlightened. And that the most important work you can do, work that will serve all of the other work you do, is to uncover your birthright and live its mandate. Great faith, great doubt, great determination. Never giving up. No matter what kind of obstacles our life throws up to you, or life in the person of your teacher throws up to you. Fuho said to me, "We're not being mean enough to them." It's true. These days, most people would not stand to be trained by one of the old Japanese teachers. But if you want, you can ask us to be meaner to you. When the mind ground is not obscured by thoughts and emotions, our innate wisdom is revealed. When the heart is not obscured by fear, our innate compassion can emerge. This is the promise of our practice.
Thank you for listening to the Zen Community of Oregon podcast, and thank you for your practice. New episodes air every week. Please consider making a donation at zendust.org. Your support supports us.